My brother's perfect fiancé was sabotaging his medication to keep him dependent on her. I planted cameras and caught her on video, then sent it to his entire family at their engagement party. He still married her and won't speak to me. My brother James had his first seizure when he was 16 years old. I was 14, sitting across from him at the kitchen table doing homework when his pencil clattered to the floor. I looked up and his eyes had rolled back, his whole body rigid and shaking. Mom screamed. Dad ran over and tried to hold him steady while I just sat there frozen, watching my brother's body do things bodies aren't supposed to do. The neurologist diagnosed him with epilepsy a week later. Focal seizures with occasional generalization, which basically meant that sometimes the electrical misfiring in his brain stayed localized and sometimes it spread. The doctor prescribed medication, lamotrigine, twice daily, 200 milligrams in the morning, 200 at night. And for 12 years, that medication worked. James took his pills religiously. Carried them in a little case in his backpack, set phone alarms to remind him. He had maybe 3 breakthrough seizures in those entire 12 years, all of them when he was sick with the flu or had missed a dose by accident. He lived a completely normal life. Got his driver's license, went to college, worked as a graphic designer. The epilepsy was just this thing he had, like wearing glasses, manageable, under control. Then 2 years ago, he met Claire. She worked at the coffee shop near his office. One of those trendy places with exposed brick and overpriced lattes. James went in every morning for his usual order, and Claire was the barista who started drawing little smiley faces in his foam. He told me about her at Sunday dinner, blushing like a teenager. "There's this girl," he said. "She's really nice. She asked about the medical alert bracelet I wear." That detail should have meant something to me. Looking back, it definitely should have meant something. Their first date was at an art gallery downtown. James was nervous about mentioning the epilepsy too early, didn't want it to define him, but Claire brought it up herself. She'd looked it up after seeing his bracelet, wanted to know what to do if he had a seizure around her. She seemed genuinely interested, genuinely caring. Not scared off like some people were when they found out. My parents loved her immediately, Mom especially. Claire would come to Sunday dinners and help clear the table, ask Mom about her garden, remember little details from previous conversations. She was attentive in that way that makes people feel seen. When James talked, she listened with her whole body, leaning forward, nodding, asking follow-up questions. And she was beautiful. That sounds shallow to point out, but it mattered to how everyone perceived her. She had this warmth about her, these big brown eyes that seemed so sincere. Dark hair she wore in loose waves. She dressed like she'd stepped out of a vintage photograph, lots of floral dresses and cardigans. The kind of woman people describe as wholesome. 6 months into their relationship, Claire moved into James's apartment. It happened faster than I expected, but James was 30 years old and capable of making his own decisions. Plus, he seemed happier than I'd seen him in years, more settled. Claire had this way of making him feel taken care of. That's when she started managing his medication. It seemed helpful at first. James had always been responsible about his pills, but Claire wanted to help. She bought him a new pill organizer, one of those weekly ones with little compartments for each day. She'd fill it for him every Sunday night, make sure he had enough refills, call the pharmacy when he was running low. She set alarms on her own phone to remind him to take his morning and evening doses. My brother works from home a lot, and Claire had a flexible barista schedule, so she was around for most of his doses. She'd bring him water, watch him take the pills, sometimes take a photo of the empty compartment, she said, to track his compliance for his neurologist. That should have been a red flag. The tracking, the photos, but it seemed conscientious, like she was really committed to keeping him healthy. Then the seizures started happening again. The first one was about 10 months after Claire moved in. James had a focal seizure while driving, minor enough that he was able to pull over, but scary enough that he didn't drive for 2 weeks afterward. His neurologist was surprised. His blood work showed therapeutic levels of medication. No reason for a breakthrough seizure. Then it happened again. And again. In 18 months, James had 8 seizures, more than he'd had in the previous decade combined. His doctor was confused, ran more tests, adjusted his dosage. Switched him to a different medication entirely. Nothing worked. The seizures kept coming. James lost his driver's license after the 4th seizure. State law, if you have 2 or more seizures in a 6-month period, you can't drive. Claire drove him everywhere after that. To doctor's appointments, to the grocery store, to visit our parents. He became dependent on her in a way he'd never been dependent on anyone. And Claire, she handled it beautifully, never complained, Always patient. Always there. Our parents praised her constantly for sticking by him when things got hard. "What a keeper," Dad would say. "You're lucky to have her, James." But I started noticing things. Little things, mostly. The way Claire answered questions at doctor's appointments before James could speak. The way she'd place her hand on his arm, gentle but firm, when he started to say something she didn't like. How she'd insist on going into the exam room with him, even when he said she didn't need to. I mentioned it once to my mom. "Don't you think Claire's a little controlling?" I asked. She wouldn't let James talk to the pharmacist alone last week when we picked up his prescription. Mom looked at me like I'd said something cruel. "She's being supportive, sweetheart. James is lucky someone loves him enough to help manage his condition." I dropped it. Because what was I supposed to say? That my gut told me something was wrong? That I had this crawling feeling under my skin every time I watched Claire touch James's medication bottles. Then, 3 months ago, I overheard a conversation that changed everything. I'd stopped by James's apartment to drop off a book I'd borrowed. It was a Tuesday afternoon. I had a spare key from years ago, back when I used to water his plants when he traveled. I let myself in, called out hello, didn't get a response. Figured James was in his office on a work call. I was setting the book on the kitchen counter when I heard Claire's voice from the bedroom. The door was open, just a crack. She was on the phone. "Another seizure last week," she was saying. Her voice was casual, almost cheerful. He was so scared after. Couldn't remember the first 10 minutes. Had to call his boss and tell him he needed to take the afternoon off. A woman's voice on the other end on speaker. That's awful. Is he okay?" I stepped closer to the hallway. I shouldn't have been listening, I knew that, but something in Claire's tone made me freeze. "Actually," Claire said, "it's perfect." My blood went cold. "What do you mean?" The friend on speaker. "I mean, when he has seizures, he needs me." Claire's voice was light, matter-of-fact, like she was discussing the weather. "He can't drive. Can't work independently without worrying about having an episode at his desk. Can't go anywhere without wondering if I'll be there to help him." It's ideal, honestly. Silence on the line, then the friend, uncertain, "I guess, but doesn't it stress you out?" "Not really." Claire laughed. "I like being needed, and it's not like it's hard work. I just have to make sure things stay the way they are." I stood in that hallway, my heart pounding so loud I thought they'd hear it. Make sure things stay the way they are. What did that mean? I left before either of them came out. Drove home with my hands shaking on the steering wheel. Played the conversation over and over in my head, trying to convince myself I'd misunderstood. But I hadn't. I started digging into Claire's past. It felt invasive and paranoid, but I couldn't let it go. I found her social media, scrolled back through years of posts. Found photos of her with a previous boyfriend, a guy named Mark. His profile said he had type 1 diabetes. They'd dated for 2 years. In the early photos, he looked healthy, active. Hiking photos, beach photos. But in the later ones, he looked worn down. Thinner, tired. I found another ex-boyfriend, 3 years before Mark. This guy, David, had asthma, severe asthma. He'd posted about hospitalizations during the time he was with Claire. 4 ER visits in 18 months. Before her, he'd gone years without needing emergency care. The pattern was there, but it wasn't proof. Not the kind that would convince anyone. I knew I needed something concrete, something undeniable. But I also knew that if I confronted Claire or told James what I suspected without evidence, she'd turn it around on me. She'd already started planting seeds with James. I'd noticed him pulling away from me over the past few months, making excuses when I suggested we hang out. So I made a decision that I knew crossed every ethical line, but I couldn't see another way. I needed to catch her in the act. I bought wireless cameras online. Tiny ones, disguised as everyday objects, a phone charger, a smoke detector. They were surprisingly affordable and shockingly easy to set up. I waited until James mentioned he and Claire were taking a weekend trip to visit her parents. Used my spare key to let myself in. I felt sick the entire time I was installing them. This was a violation. I knew that. I was invading my brother's privacy in the most fundamental way. But I kept thinking about those seizures. 8 seizures in 18 months. James's life falling apart piece by piece while Claire smiled and played the devoted caregiver. The cameras uploaded footage continuously to cloud storage. I set them up in the kitchen where the medication was stored. In the living room, anywhere Claire might do something when she thought she was alone. Then I waited. For 2 days, nothing. Just normal life. Claire making breakfast, James working at his desk. Them watching TV together in the evening. On day 3, I saw it. It was a Tuesday morning. James had left for a client meeting. Claire was alone in the apartment. I was at work, checking the camera feed on my phone during my lunch break when I saw her go to the kitchen cabinet where James kept his medication. She pulled out his pill bottle, the lamotrigine he was supposed to be taking twice daily. She opened it, carried it to the sink, and dumped the entire contents down the garbage disposal. My hands started shaking so hard I almost dropped my phone. Claire rinsed the bottle. Then she went to a different cabinet, pulled out a bottle I'd never seen before. Vitamin B complex tablets. They were the same size, same shape, same color as James's medication. She filled his prescription bottle with the vitamins, put it back in the cabinet exactly where it had been. Then she pulled out a small notebook from her purse, wrote something. The camera angle wasn't perfect, but I could make out enough. Day 3 without real meds, expecting seizure within 72 to 96 hours. I sat in my car in the parking lot outside my office and watched this footage over and over. Watched Claire methodically replace my brother's life-saving medication with vitamins. Watched her document it like a scientist conducting an experiment. 2 days later, James had a seizure. A bad one. I wasn't there, but I saw the aftermath on the cameras. Claire called 911. The paramedics arrived. I watched Claire explain to them, her voice concerned and exhausted, that James wouldn't take his medication consistently. That she tried to help him, but he was non-compliant. That this had been happening more and more lately. The EMTs believed her. Why wouldn't they? She was the devoted girlfriend. The caregiver, the one who'd stuck by him when things got hard. James spent 4 hours in the ER. They ran tests. His blood work showed almost no lamotrigine in his system. The doctors assumed he hadn't been taking his medication. James swore he had been. Swore he took it every morning and night, just like he was supposed to. No one believed him. They thought he was embarrassed about being non-compliant. They increased his dosage. Sent him home with instructions to be more careful. I downloaded everything. Every second of footage. Time-stamped. Dated. Backed up in 3 different locations. Then I had to figure out what to do with it. I spent 3 days agonizing over the right approach. I showed the footage to a lawyer friend. She watched it once, her expression getting darker with each passing second. "This is assault and battery," she said. "Maybe even attempted murder, depending on how you want to argue it. You need to go to the police." But I knew how that would play out. The police would call James, would tell him I'd filed a report. And Claire would find out. She'd have time to come up with a story, time to gaslight James, time to make me look like the crazy, jealous sister who'd faked evidence to break them up. I thought about showing James the footage privately, sitting him down one-on-one, making him watch. But I remembered how he'd been pulling away from me, how Claire had been subtly poisoning our relationship for months. If I showed him alone, she'd convince him the video was edited, deep-faked, that I'd hired actors. That I was so desperate to ruin his happiness I'd staged an elaborate lie. He wouldn't believe me, not if it was just my word against hers, so I made a decision that I've questioned every day since. I would show the footage publicly, in front of everyone. At a moment when there were too many witnesses for Claire to spin her way out of it. Their engagement party was in 3 weeks. My parents were hosting it at their house. 60 people invited. Friends, family, coworkers. Claire had been planning it for months. She'd made a slideshow of photos from their relationship, sweet candid shots of them hiking, cooking together, laughing, the perfect couple. I volunteered to help with the technical setup. Mom was relieved. "You know I'm terrible with the TV and laptop stuff," she said. "Can you make sure the slideshow works?" "Of course," I said. The party was on a Saturday afternoon. I arrived early to help set up. Brought my laptop, told my parents I'd loaded the slideshow onto it so it would run more smoothly. They didn't question it. Why would they? Guests started arriving around too. Claire looked beautiful in a blue dress that matched her eyes. James looked happy, relaxed. He had his arm around her, introducing her to relatives she hadn't met yet. Everyone was drinking champagne, eating appetizers, congratulating the happy couple. I felt sick the entire time, kept second-guessing myself. Maybe I should pull James aside first. Maybe I should give him one more chance to see it privately. But every time I looked at Claire, at her hand possessively on James's arm, at the way she smiled at the guests, I remembered that notebook. Day 3, without real meds. Around 3:30, Dad announced it was time for the slideshow. Everyone gathered in the living room. Dad fumbled with the TV remote, couldn't figure out how to get the right input. I stepped in. "Here, let me help." I connected my laptop. Pulled up what looked like Claire's slideshow on the screen. The first few slides were actually from her original presentation. Photos of James and Claire at the beach, at a restaurant, kissing in front of a sunset. Everyone oohed and awed. "This is so sweet," someone said. Then, after the fifth slide, the video started playing. It was the kitchen camera footage. Crystal clear, time-stamped. Claire walking to the cabinet, pulling out James's medication bottle, dumping the pills down the garbage disposal. The room went silent. The video kept playing. Claire filling the bottle with vitamins. Writing in her notebook, day 3 without real meds. I glanced at Claire. All the color had drained from her face. She was staring at the screen like she'd seen a ghost. The video continued, showed her on the phone with her friend. When he has seizures, he needs me. Can't drive. Can't work independently. It's ideal, honestly. Someone gasped. My mom. Dad was frozen, glass of champagne halfway to his mouth. The video showed the day of James's seizure. Claire calling 911, telling the paramedics James wouldn't take his medication. Then it ended. The screen went black. The silence in that room was absolute. 60 people, not one of them making a sound. James was staring at the blank TV screen. His face had gone completely white. He turned to look at Claire first, not me. I watched his expression cycle through confusion, then dawning horror, then something else, something I couldn't quite read. Claire burst into tears, loud, heaving sobs. This isn't real, she choked out. This isn't real, it can't be real. James stood up slowly. Did you? He couldn't finish the sentence. His hand went to his medical alert bracelet, touching it like he was grounding himself in something real. She faked it, Claire said, pointing at me. She's always been jealous of us, James. She never liked me. This is edited or AI or something. Please, you have to believe me. James turned to look at me then. Sarah? I stood up, my legs were shaking. I installed cameras in your apartment 3 weeks ago. I'm sorry, I know that was wrong, but I had to know for sure. Claire's been replacing your medication with vitamins. She's been causing your seizures on purpose. You put cameras in my apartment? James's voice was barely above a whisper. Yes. Without my permission? Yes. Because I overheard her on the phone talking about how perfect it was that you kept having seizures. Because I looked into her past and found 2 other ex-boyfriends with chronic conditions whose health mysteriously declined while they were with her. Because I knew if I told you without proof, she'd convince you I was lying. Claire was shaking her head frantically. This is insane. James, I would never. I love you. Everything I've done has been to help you. My aunt stepped forward. I think we all need to calm down and, no. James's voice cut through the room. He was still staring at the blank TV screen. The notebook. I've seen that notebook. Claire keeps it in her purse. I asked her once what it was for, and she said it was a journal. Claire's sobbing got louder, more desperate. James, please, show me the notebook. His voice was eerily calm. I don't have it here. Yes, you do. You always have your purse with you. The room watched as James walked over to where Claire's designer handbag sat on the side table. She lunged for it, but my dad stepped between them. James opened the bag, pulled out a small black notebook. He flipped through it. His hands were shaking. Page after page of entries. Dates, times, notes about medication, about seizures, about his dependence on her. James dropped the notebook like it had burned him. He looked at Claire with an expression I'd never seen on my brother's face before, pure, undiluted horror. Get out, he said quietly. James, get out. The shout was so sudden, so loud that several people jumped. Get out of this house. Get away from me. Don't call me, don't text me, don't ever come near me again. Claire stood there for a moment, mascara running down her face, looking around the room desperately for someone to take her side. No one would meet her eyes. She grabbed her purse and ran. After she left, the party dissolved into chaos. People were talking all at once. My mom was crying. My dad was on the phone with someone, maybe the police, I couldn't tell. Various relatives were trying to talk to James, who stood frozen in the middle of the living room, still staring at that notebook on the floor. I walked over to him carefully. James. Don't, he held up a hand, just don't. I'm so sorry I had to do it this way, but I didn't know how else. I need you to leave too. His voice was flat, empty. What? You put cameras in my apartment, Sarah. You spied on me for weeks. You invaded my privacy in the most fundamental way possible. He finally looked at me. His eyes were red-rimmed but dry. I know why you did it. I understand the logic, but you violated my trust. You violated my space. And you humiliated me in front of everyone I know. I saved your life. I know. He cut me off. I know you did, and I'll probably thank you for it someday. But right now I need you to leave. I left. That was 3 months ago. The police did investigate. Claire was arrested and charged with assault and reckless endangerment. The district attorney said they had enough evidence for conviction. The videos, the notebook, testimony from Claire's ex-boyfriends who came forward after seeing the news coverage. Her trial is set for next fall. James's health improved immediately once he got back on real medication. No seizures. His doctor was amazed by how quickly he stabilized. James moved to a new apartment, couldn't stand being in the old one. Got a therapist who specializes in abuse survivors. But he still won't talk to me. I've tried. Sent texts that went unread. Left voicemails that went unreturned. Showed up at my parents' house when I knew he'd be there for Sunday dinner, and he walked out the back door when I came in the front. My mom says he just needs time. That he knows I did the right thing, but the betrayal of the cameras cuts too deep. That he's trying to process the fact that someone he loved was slowly killing him, and he can't separate that trauma from how he found out. Dad's less optimistic. You crossed a line, he told me last week. Maybe it was the right call, maybe it wasn't, but you can't violate someone like that and expect them to just forgive you. I lie awake at night replaying every decision. Should I have tried harder to show him privately first? Should I have gone to the police first, even knowing Claire would have time to cover her tracks? Should I have done nothing at all and let James figure it out himself? I don't know. I'll probably never know. All I know is that I showed my brother proof that his fiancée was slowly killing him. I did it in the most public, humiliating way possible. And even though I saved his life, he can't forgive me for how I did it. Claire goes to trial in 8 months. I'll have to testify. James will have to testify. We'll be in the same courtroom for the first time since the engagement party. I don't know what I'll say to him if we're alone in a hallway during a recess. I don't know if he'll even look at me. But I know one thing for certain. Given the choice again, cameras and public humiliation and destroyed relationships and all, I'd do the exact same thing. Because my brother is alive. He's healthy. He's free. And maybe someday that will be enough. Thanks for exploring this with me today. Drop a like if you stuck around.